So the insurance industry can be tough, but being a woman in the insurance industry is like a whole different beast.
You in the past, I'm in the future. You mad that they don't salute you.
Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, my name is Keela Trishan and I make videos on lifestyle, insurance, and mental health. I also do vlogs, day in the life in the insurance industry, day in the life with a toddler, all the things. So if that's something that interests you, go on ahead and click that subscribe button below. Be sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything from me. And if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back and thank you for your support. Okay, so today I want to talk about something different that I don't think I've ever really discussed in the insurance industry, but it's basically being a woman and how to like navigate this space confidently and throughout bias. So, as I've said in many videos, I've been doing this for a little over 7 years and I didn't really experience much, I would say, discrimination when I was like a desk adjuster. In some cases, like especially when I was dealing with vehicles, sometimes when I would present values, people would, sometimes question if I knew what I was talking about and like different parts of vehicles. But I noticed that I experienced it more in the field space. So like I'm actually coming out to the home to look at damages, I'm writing estimates. So I noticed that I'll get a little more kind of like side eyes when they see me coming up to do the actual inspection, like they see that I am the face, I am the adjuster. And some of you guys have mentioned having that experience as well, just being a woman and trying to figure out how to confidently navigate the space. So I have some tips today that I wanted to kind of discuss with you if you're experiencing this, if it's something that you're worried about potentially experiencing, and I just kind of wanted to bring it to the forefront. So if you are interested, definitely go on ahead and stay tuned. Okay, so jumping right in, my first tip is to be upfront about what you don't know. As an adjuster, there are going to be times where people are going to kind of rapid fire ask you questions, and some things you will know, some things you don't know. Especially as a new adjuster, you're trying to figure out this space. Sometimes people will ask you questions on the spot, different things that have to do with the policy, different things that have to do with materials, whatever. And some of those things you just simply don't know. Don't ever be afraid to just say, hey, I need to do a little more research, or you know what, I'm not sure, let me get the answer and come back to you. I think one of the worst ways as a woman to put your foot in your mouth is to act like you know something or, kind of BS through the answer. And then later on, they find out that you really didn't know. It kind of like it takes away your credibility. Now, this is going to be the same whether you're a male or a female, but I do feel like as a woman navigating this space, sometimes people look at you and just assume that you don't know what the hell you're doing. So don't give them any fuel. Just be upfront and say, hey, you know what? Good question. Let me find out. I'll get back to you. That's my go-to. Even though now I have a lot of knowledge of like just kind of how to put things together, I have a lot of policy knowledge, there are things that come up where I'm like, you know what, I have no clue. And I am not afraid to say, hey, I'm not quite sure. Let me do some research. Let me talk to my team. I don't usually use the term like, let me go talk to my manager and stuff, because I don't want to put that out there. Like every time I need something, I go to my manager. Because in the customer's mind, this is just side note, sometimes the customer can look at it like, okay, well, just go talk to your manager. Like, nah, I'm managing this claim, so let me go do some research. Let me go talk to my manager. So yeah, like don't be afraid to let people know like, hey, not, completely well-versed, or I'm not really sure on the answer. Let me go and find out that information and get back to you. I think that is I think it takes a lot of courage, honestly, to let people know that you don't know something, as opposed to bullshitting through it and making it seem like you know everything when you don't. So just let them know that you'll get back to them with an answer, and then make sure that in the time frame that you gave them, you get back to them. So if you say give me a day or two to get back to you, make sure you get back to them in a day or two. Yeah, be upfront if there is something that you were asked that you don't know right on the spot. Okay, so my second tip is to know your resources. Now, this is not just, limited to you being a female in the industry. This is kind of for everybody, but I feel like as a woman, it is important to know like what your resources are. Now, your resources can be company resources. Like if you have a particular place on the company website, for example, where there's like frequently asked questions or ways to, let's say, write an estimate, you can use the policy as your resource. If somebody asks you a question about coverage and you're not sure, go and look at your policy. Like make sure that you know what you're talking about before you go and speak to this person. Even different colleagues or like vendors can be your resources. Like there are some contractors that I work with closely that I've known for years, like even since my time at my previous company, that I can go to and say, hey, this contractor is saying that he needs this for this type of damage. Does this make sense to you? You know, like that kind of thing. It's important, I feel like, as a woman to have those resources, because in my experience, a lot of us haven't had like a contractor background, or, you know, if you work in auto, you haven't had like, let's say, a body shop background. So you may not know how to put certain things together. Policy, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. We kind of have that at our fingertips because we're responsible for determining coverage. But as far as like other like more technical things, you have to know where to go, because unfortunately your go-to people might not always be around and stuff. So I think it's important to have like several different resources that you use. So if you need an answer in a pinch, or you need an answer a little bit quicker than you can get it from like your go-to person, you always have those resources at your fingertips. So get to know your company's, I would say, online resources. Even like YouTube and Google honestly can be your friend. I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten an estimate from a contractor and I don't know what something is. And so I will go do a quick like YouTube search or Google search, and then it'll explain to me what this particular thing is without me having to ask someone. So like, have kind of like a section in your computer, on your phone, or whatever, where you have like resources that you can look at from time to time if you're in a pinch and need that information right away. Okay, so my third tip is pretty self-explanatory, but I do feel like as a woman, this is very important, because sometimes we have a tendency, because we're so feminine and we, you know, exude that feminine energy, we want to be nice, we want to please everybody and all that stuff. But sometimes you just have to be firm and you have to be confident in what you're talking about. So make sure that you know the information and be confident in your delivery of the information. I personally, I do not speak on things that I do not know. Like I said in the first tip, if I don't know something, I will get the answer, and when I come back to you, I am going to confidently deliver it to you. This is very important, because if you show any type of weakness, especially like if you're delivering bad news, like you can't cover something, or the reason why you can't cover something, the reason why something failed, or whatever. If you're not confident in that delivery, then people will sniff that out a mile away, and then they'll try to discredit you. So it is important, even if you're not confident, you need to practice having these conversations so people don't try you. I've had plenty of situations, especially in the beginning of my career, where I'm delivering information and maybe I did ask somebody for their input and I didn't quite understand the explanation. So I'm almost stumbling through my explanation to the customer, which makes me look like I'm not confident in the answer. So then I'm having to go back and forth, and I'm inadvertently giving this customer the idea that maybe there is like some other type of way that something can be covered or that something can be done, when in actuality there's not. So make sure you know what you're talking about. I haven't always done this, but I do think it's a good idea to practice your denials, practice like your conversations, your technical conversations with people that you trust, whether that be family, colleagues, somebody in the industry that like, you know, knows the job, that kind of thing. Because the last thing you want to do is come off as not confident, especially as a woman, because I feel like people will try you more if you come off as like meek and, oh, you know, I don't know. They'll try you a little bit more. So just to kind of alleviate a lot of that, you do have to exude confidence. And the only way you can have confidence is if you come prepared to have the conversation and know what you're talking about. Okay, so my fourth tip is to get cool with and build a rapport with the vendors that you're going to be using all the time. So for me, it is going to be like my mitigation vendors and my contractors. There are certain mitigation vendors that are assigned to multiple claims, because a lot of my claims are in the same area. So I might work with this particular water mitigation vendor on several different claims, so I get to know the employees. Same thing with contractors. When I assign a contractor to a file, I might have that contractor on several different jobs because they just so happen to be in the area and they just so happen to be available to do the work for my customers. So one thing in the industry, sometimes I think that like it can be two ways. So sometimes like the vendors don't really like the adjusters because the adjusters can be narrow-minded and like they're so tight on like the pocketbook, I guess. And it's not because they're trying to be assholes. It's more because like, you know, we have our certain guidelines for how we write our estimates, but then obviously the contractor has their guidelines for how things need to be done. So for me, I try to have that balance of, okay, how am I going to adhere to the policy, but also make sure that the customer has enough to do what they need to do to get their home fixed. And that's where it is helpful to have these relationships with the vendors. when you have these like good relationships, just building a rapport, having a contact, I feel like it helps you, because if you ever need somebody to come out with you to a loss, like if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel confident in what needs to be done and what you're looking at, these vendors will come out with you and like kind of stand with you, and they'll kind of be like your eyes and ears to like show you, hey, this is what we need to do to fix this. This is what's going on here. They can kind of help you with that while you're working on the policy information. So I think that that's really helpful as a woman, because in my experience, a lot of times these mitigation vendors are male based, or even with the contractors. So if you kind of have like that male counterpart with you when you're talking to these customers, and it shouldn't always have to be like this, but I'm just trying to be realistic with you guys. Sometimes when I come with my male counterpart, the customer a lot of times will feel more, depending on the customer. Let me just say that some customers feel more confident knowing that there's somebody here backing up what I have to say. So it sucks that you even have to do this sometimes, but I think one, it can kind of enhance your credibility, and then two, it just makes you more confident in your delivery of information because you have someone there that does this, that's co-signing, what you're doing. So having these good relationships with vendors will help you really in the long run, because this is one of those industries where it's big, but it's small. So even just me moving around different companies, there are a lot of vendors that I've worked with at other companies that I now see here, so having those good relationships, I feel like when you take care of them, they take care of you. So that is a really good thing to have, especially as a woman working in this industry, just knowing that you have other people that have your back that can vouch for you. Okay, so my fifth tip is going to be more geared towards like reviewing estimates and like not getting swindled. Don't ever be afraid to ask contractors and like whatever vendors you're working with, whether that be the vendors that are provided by the insurance company or the insured is providing. Don't ever be afraid to ask them questions on why something needs to be done. This is going to be especially important, I think, in the beginning, because you want to build that rapport with the vendor or contractor, so they know like, hey, if I'm going to ask for something additional on an estimate that's like outside of the scope of work, that's outside of what the policy normally covers, I need to be able to explain to this individual why it's needed so it can get covered. Case in point, I review a lot of supplements. I think I've told you guys that before. So typically with insurance, they ask us to write like a preliminary estimate based on what we see as owed. So when I go out to the inspection, when I go to an inspection location, I am looking to see if there's coverage, and if there is, I'm preparing an estimate based on the items that I know are going to be owed. So maybe when I go and look at the loss, there is drywall that needs to be repaired, which would include paint, texturing the wall, that kind of thing. Maybe there's some flooring, so I write an estimate for the repair of the floors. But then when I get a supplement from the contractor, they're adding on, maybe electrical, they're adding on whatever else that, may not have been in my estimate. For the most part, I can usually figure out why something is needed, and this is just with experience. I can figure out why something is needed based on the photos, based on what the mitigation vendor needed to do. If there was additional work that warranted these other items, I'm usually able to figure that out. But there are times where contractors will slip in items that aren't necessarily needed for the job. Maybe it's something where they're trying to fluff up the estimate and get additional money. Maybe it's something where the customer is trying to do an upgrade that's not necessarily owed. So sometimes these things will be slipped into the estimate. What's important about asking questions is you want to let these contractors know that you are looking at the estimate in its entirety. I've noticed that in some cases, when they think that you don't have experience, or if they think that you are a woman that doesn't know what you're doing, they'll slip in things with the hopes that you don't catch it, and then you just simply pay it. You want to let them know, like, no, I'm looking through all of this and this doesn't make sense, so I need you to explain to me why it's needed. Now, the reason why that's important is because you want to set that tone. So just in case you get this contractor or vendor again, they know, okay, Keela's going to ask me why I put this in here, so I better have a good answer if I wanted to get paid for it. Or they just simply won't include it anymore because they know that you're not going for the BS. You see what I'm saying? So don't be afraid if you don't understand something. Have that contractor explain to you, okay, why is this needed? In my experience now, because I've dealt with so many different claims, I typically know why things are needed, and it's really easy for me to spot when somebody's just simply trying to add fluff, or somebody's trying to just enhance the estimate or get something additional that's owed. You need to be able to explain to me why this is needed and why the policy should cover it, because I'm the one who is going to go and ask my higher ups if it's like out of my authority for that additional money to pay. So don't ever be afraid to ask questions. I think sometimes we get similar to like the first one where like you need to be upfront with what you don't know. Sometimes as women, we can get intimidated because we already know that people think we don't know as much. So sometimes we get intimidated and we don't ask questions and we assume we know and we don't know. If there's something like a process that, I've never seen before, I don't have a problem asking the contractor or vendor, hey, why is this needed? Just asking, why is it needed? Why does this work this way? That kind of thing. So I can be able to articulate that in my file and ask for it if it seems warranted. So don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Like, at the end of the day, you're working with them and they're working with you, and you need to be able to understand for your job why something is being done, because you have to determine if it's owed on the policy. So just get comfortable with questioning these estimates and stuff like that, because there are more times than not where things are going to be added to the estimate that aren't necessarily needed, and you need to get comfortable with kind of like ciphering through that and being able to ask the tough questions. That'll kind of help your credibility as well, because they know that you're looking. All right, you guys, so that is all that I have for you today. Now, some of these tips, actually all the tips, they're pretty practical, and there are things that I feel like whether you're male or female, you should be doing. But I do feel like in this industry and other industries that are male dominated, women sometimes get the short end of the stick, and it's not always done on purpose, but sometimes people just don't think that we know as much. Or you might look a certain way and they might think that, you're not credible or whatever. So it's important, in order to combat those things, to kind of go in knowing how to conduct yourself and how to be confident, because you need that respect in order to do your job, especially if you plan on being in this industry for the long haul. You want to make sure that you kind of set that tone to where anybody that mentions your name, they know, oh, she's not going for the BS. She knows what she's talking about, and you essentially build that trust. So understand too that it takes time. If you are a new adjuster coming in as a woman, it's going to take time to build that confidence. It's going to take time to learn the job. Specifically with homeowners in the field, they tell you that it takes about 1.5 to 2 years to be completely confident in doing this job. And I'll say this, even now, I've been doing, specifically homeowners, I've been doing for like 4 to 5 years, and I still have questions that come up. I just know how to navigate now, having done it for so long. So don't beat yourself up if you don't know what to do right away. Again, it takes time, and it takes time to build relationships and stuff. You just have to be willing to do the work so you don't get ate alive in this field. If you enjoyed and if you learned something, definitely go on ahead and give me a thumbs up. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you made it this far and have not subscribed, please go on ahead and click that subscribe button. Definitely turn on your notifications as well so you don't miss anything from me. And with that being said, you guys have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.
They don't salute you. I need a bag, size is super. They turned your back, it's like I never knew you. Leave that.